show.
All right. So I want to get started with so
Twitterati.
the
The
Twitter
Twitterati.
thought, the Twitterati.
Twitterati. Well, I mean, it's the Twitter throttling. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So how do you
I'm not
see
I'm not eloquent enough to say Twitter throtty. What I don't even know what you said. Yeah.
throttling?
Oh,
Okay. There you go. All
yeah.
right. So how do you see this as sort of a non-tech person?
So I one, I mean, like it was. I think it was. I understand kind of. I'm starting to understand more and more of why it happened and what the cause of it was. Um, it's shocking and let's call it, I don't know, distasteful for users whenever it just like jumps up into your timeline and cuts off you being able to use Twitter. I don't think that was executed well. That would be my statement. Because nobody knew anything about it, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's just like, oh, Twitter's just shut down. Like you just can't, like there's limits now. And then Elon addressed it, and I think he did a good job of addressing it and explaining why, and then also reacting quickly to adjust those limits so that people weren't as impacted, right?
Yeah. And in case this wasn't clear, we're referring to the restriction on how many tweets you can view a day. Um, no, I think it's
And to be clear, those were, if you were blue verified, it was 6,000.
right.
If you were a signed in verified user, it was like 600. And if you were like a new user, it's like 300. And then they bumped those to,
Bumped
oh,
them twice, I think, because
yeah, they
it was
bumped them
like
twice. It's like 4,
8,000.
8, and 8, 400, 800, and 8,000. And then they bumped it again to 500, 1,000, and like 10,000.
10,000? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which are much more reasonable numbers, right?
I mean, I don't know. It seems
Like,
to be because nobody seems to be complaining about the throttling anymore. So my guess is that they just didn't do the due diligence well in determining what that number should be in order to set that limit, and they just picked something and were like, yeah, we should, this is probably good, and underestimated the people who are heavy users that may not be verified as to how much they're actually scrolling through their Twitter and looking at things.
yeah, I
But
mean, coming from the perspective of a web application engineer, I completely get it. Like, you have a lot of tech issues. You have trying to handle server overload. There's not a lot you can do other than throttle, at least as a temporary workaround. This seemed like the most kind of using tech province naive way of doing this. Um, like it just didn't incorporate any knowledge from the system, didn't incorporate any analytics or statistics, and kind of felt very clumsy. And that I thought was sort of the most annoying part of that, in my opinion. Like it it could have been done a lot. Like he could have planned this better. I don't think they were going to be just completely screwed over if they waited a day. Now maybe not. Maybe they were completely caught off guard and they were worried about complete server crash. Um,
well, I mean,
but
from what I've seen, it sounds like it was a response to the big thing that I've heard was data scraping, which is
yeah,
absolutely, from what I understand, is absolutely enormous and is really taxing on those assets. And there's even been some people who have, you know, put forth ideas that it may have been being done intentionally to try to bankrupt Twitter because of the cost, because there's a cost associated with any data going in and any data going out. And so if they're doing these mass scrapes of data, then, you know, that could potentially cost them millions of dollars annually.
yes,
And, you know, plus it also would, I would imagine, slow down it again. Not tech person's over
Sure.
there. Um, but would slow down your servers and slow down like what you know, your retrieval rates and all that kind of fun stuff are. And so that was my understanding, is that it was like, okay, we need to, and
Yeah.
people were making a lot of money off of scraping the Twitter data for free. And so like I don't blame Elon of being like, hey, no, you need to pay me for that instead of it costing me money. And I just think that it was, again, I think it was poorly executed, but I think that it makes sense once it's explained and you understand the hows and
Yeah.
whys and
It
what you would do.
the like it is a very real, like this should be regarded as an attack on the network, because people think of Twitter as this software. It's not. I mean, that is not what Twitter really is. It's first and foremost, like, the main offering of it at its core is a network. The tech is not that special. In fact, it's, you give me a team of 30 engineers and I can make probably better, and from a just interface based software perspective, better technology in 6 months. Um, what Twitter has that is really of value is the network, the users, the actual connection network, the computers, everything, all of that. That is of value, and this is an attack on the network. Not just in the immediate sense, but also in the secondary sense. Is if you're scraping a lot of data, you can start to, especially in the age of AI, you can start to pull out patterns and trends and use that to manipulate the network. So having a handle on who's doing this is essential, because otherwise you could have somebody who wants the network to do what it wants, which is kind of what happened prior to Elon, is they had their fingers all in that. And you've got to believe that they're going to be trying everything they can to claw that back. So it is an essential thing for them to combat. As far as to why it's happened, a couple people have pointed to the fact that this is approximately the time that their Google Cloud contract expired, and they're not re-upping, at least not in the same capacity. Which there's people are pointing to things like state actors that may have had backdoors into Google Cloud that didn't need to scrape beforehand, um, and doing stuff like that. As you know, other theories are that it's people who don't want to be seen as being on Twitter. So people that are like, no, I'm not on Twitter anymore. Yeah, I'm boycotting Twitter, but they can't let it go because that's where everything's happening right now. Especially since Elon got back. I mean, I in my personal experience, it seems like a lot of these other Gab, whatever, has really died down in
Yeah.
user base, because why? The only competitor might be Truth Social, simply because of Donald Trump. Um, but
Yeah, that'd be my estimation too.
yeah, so he's going to have to get a handle on why it's happening, and I think that I think he's got to look more into using this as a way to uh, improve behavior of users. And I mean that in like reward participation, find ways of rewarding users that produce the content that keeps people there and makes people want to use the network, improves the quality of the network,
Hmm.
and sort of and find a way to almost like really some kind of Twitter coin type thing might be useful, where
Like
you
Shiba Inu.
uh,
It's not
I
financial
actually,
advice.
I
Just
mean,
saying.
frankly, Doge.
Or
He should
Doge.
just
Yeah.
integrate Doge into it and use that so people can be tipped and paid in Doge, and small amounts in Doge can be used to uh, buy more views, right? Oh, I've viewed 1,000 tweets for free every day. Well, but I can use Doge and buy another, 500 tweets or something to be added on to supplement my daily allotment or something.
Maybe.
Um,
I
it's a
don't think
little,
I don't think it's a money grab. Like there were people that were, you know, theorizing that, oh, Elon just wants everybody to sign up for Twitter Blue. Um, and that, I mean, like there may be that, but the more that I hear about it, I don't think that's the case. I think it was more of just like protecting the network and protecting the system.
I mean,
And
it's
it makes sense.
short term, they're probably right. Long term, they're indistinguishable because if you have money, you can just buy more servers and more. You can solve the network effect by with more money, basically.
Sure.
Um, that's so there's sort of an aspect of creating a system that will solve it in the long term, where yeah, you want to charge for it, which will have the dual effect of gaining you more income as well as decreasing the amount of the people that are using Twitter. Um, but I don't know. I'm not. I think Elon's kind of sort of stuck Twitter in his back pocket and just wants it to sort of maintain there. I don't think he has a lot of plans for it other than he feels it's important to exist. And I think that's maybe part of the problem. That he's
Yeah.
like, the CEO he hired, she's awful. Like you can just tell she's awful. Things she's brought since she's come on, I think Twitter has largely been in the decline.
I mean, potentially. I mean, I don't, I haven't noticed that much of a difference. And, you know, what little, if it, if what little difference there is, then I could say I can see that argument of like, oh yeah, it's slightly declined. But I had like in reality, like I haven't noticed my user experience be that much different. So I don't see that that's really that big of an issue. And I think like if you're looking at it, I think that it seems like they're trying to find a good balance where everybody can have access to Twitter, can be able to be on and engage and interact, and really only those people who are just super involved and really getting out there and really messing with stuff, that those are the ones that will be basically kind of required to pay for Twitter Blue in order to get the level of access that they want. Um, and so, yeah, I think that makes sense of,
Sure. I'm more thinking from in terms of the quality, more the content being throttled, the specific topics being banned or downranked or issues arising with that. You can look at the what
I,
is the woman issue.
I mean, I have, yeah, that was I think that was a big misstep by them. But I haven't since, besides that issue, I haven't really seen much in the way of, I mean, hell, we talked about last stream about the videos that I've seen come across Twitter that were staying up and not immediately getting nuked. And, for one of the things that we're going to talk about here in a minute is, the riots that are going on in Paris, like those things are going up and they're staying up.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's there's in some ways I haven't completely lost hope. I'm just seeing that, and I what I'm seeing now is Elon is kind of like he tried to pull away and I was like, God damn it, I can't. And he like I think I think he's probably having I think he's having to manage the CEO, which is I think in some ways he's somewhat used to it, but I'm not sure this is what he expected. And I think I would not be surprised if next year he's looking for another CEO.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. I mean, I think
Um,
it's interesting that he picked that CEO to begin with, but I understand kind of why he did it because she comes from the marketing world and they were trying to get advertisers back to the platform. Um, and so, okay, but then she, especially with the what is a woman issue, right? Like that went kind of off the rails. And at that point, I go, okay, well, maybe this isn't going so well. And then not only did they put it back up, they left it up for like, they were supposed to put it up for like 24 or 48 hours and they left it up for like a week.
yep,
I don't even, yeah, it may still be
that was
up. I haven't checked it
probably
at all.
directly response to fine, if you censor us, we're gonna do everything we can to make it more accessible.
Right.
Um, and I want to be actually after that. There could be very real things where she may not even make it to the end of the year. Like it may be something where he's shopping around right now, just because he saw that
Possibly. Yeah.
she fought him on this. He's like, this is, if you're not going to be enacting my vision, you got to go.
Yeah.
And maybe it was just that was issue one. I don't know. We'll see. But I think it makes sense.
It could have just
You
been a
know,
misunderstanding of like, oh, you thought you were going to run things. Let me explain to you that's not how this is going to go. I went on this as this is going to be free speech. Expect that, and I expect you to follow that. So if this happens again, then like, I'm going to go sit in the principal's office and we're going
yeah.
to
I
have a
mean,
strong talk.
I think
But I
what
haven't
you,
noticed any other
but I also think it was the
related things.
wrong direction because I think you need to not be beholden to advertisers at all. And I think that this was a capitulation to advertisers. I think instead what you need to do is look into ways of monetize. You bring a CEO who knows how to monetize networks in a way
Sure.
that's not advertising. And there's not a lot. Granted, there's not a lot of people that even have a lot of theories how to do this. I mean, I could give you my own theories on how to do it, but uh, it's like you got to look at who you want your customers to be. And I think if it's advertisers, it's gonna just it's gonna be subpar compared to what it could be without that. You know, you kind
Sure.
of hinted at it where you have like if you make people that are producing like your customers should be like the people that want to reach with the network. So content creators and companies who want to, manage their market or distribute content. And then but you also have your power users that want to be able to consume massive amounts of content.
Sure.
And you need to have,
And I think it's fair for you to ask those people who want to consume massive amounts of content to pay $8 a month.
sure, but you need to provide a significant, I think you need to provide a significant value offering other than you just get to consume a lot more content. It
Why?
Well, it depends on how much you charge. If it's like, I think $8 is a little much for that. Um, like I would expect something more like being able to curate the content more effectively, being able to,
You do get to the ability to edit.
ooh, um, that's like those are token things, right? Like, yeah, that's nice for power users, but these talking almost those are more of the um, content creators that benefit from that. There's not much that benefits just the users, just the people that view and consume information.
So you're
So
talking about doing like multi levels of Twitter Blue, like having Twitter Blue and Twitter Gold, which I think they have. I mean, if you're like if you are a company, then there's a different tier that you can sign on to that's evidently much more expensive.
yeah, and
And for the people that are religiously on Twitter, then I mean, $8 a month it is really not that much money.
sure, and it's I'd say it depends on how you use it. Um, like I'm on Twitter all the time, but I'm not like talking. I'm not saying much. I'm just mostly consuming and filtering through information. And
Hmm.
there's not a lot of value in the tools that are offered by Twitter Blue to filter that information. Granted, I haven't hit that rate limit yet. Um,
Right.
so maybe we're talking
It's a
about a
non-issue.
whole extra level of that. So but I'm kind of like guessing a little bit here, and
The other
it's
thing is that you don't necessarily, personally, I don't think that you see the value there, right, to you, but because you could live without Twitter and it would be fine, right?
yeah,
And a lot of people just couldn't, and they don't do that. They don't think that way. And so you kind of have like, all right, fine. Like, and anything cheaper than $8, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of an arbitrary number, but like I get it. It's not that much. And if you want to be a member, and and to be honest, like if they got to where they had most members signing up or a significant portion, then they could probably drop that price some. But
sure. And
otherwise, you're opening the floodgates to
I mean, I agree in principle. I just think they need to offer a little bit more tools for the information consumer.
Tools like what?
Um, Something to help, like something that's more about curating and filtering tweets. Like maybe you can have multiple like algorithm training sets. If that makes sense. So you have different tabs for different type of topics that you're training from an
Sure.
algorithm perspective. It's off the top of my head. You're going to have to get creative here a little bit, but something that approaches the problem from the perspective of consuming the information, as opposed to most of the Twitter Blue stuff seems to be for network outreach and content creators, which is great. You want to monetize that. I actually think that you can probably charge more for that and add more features and target the big companies more. But sounds like he's doing that.
Right. I guess my only concern is that the people that are just consuming content, that are not
Mm-hmm.
interacting, how much do you really care about what their experience truly is? Because what you really want is you want interaction. You want them putting things out there, you want them responding to things, you want them liking, retweeting, quote tweeting
From or are we talking
from a
about trying?
business perspective, from the company's perspective.
But I'm not talking about monetizing those people. I'm not talking about giving those features away for free. I'm talking about those are the premium features. Those are the things you charge for. And so that you are now monetizing your biggest cost, which is the viewers who are just consuming the information. Right? That's the biggest tie into your cost is the number of users.
Sure, but I mean, like, yeah, the problem is then you start making things, I think, too complicated. You complicate things entirely too much because then you have to have one tier that is essentially you're trying to monetize the people that are just consuming. You have another tier for people that are like more regular users, right? Personalities, stuff like that. Then you have another tier that's for businesses, right?
I mean, yeah, you could have three tiers. You could have and you could subdivide it within those tiers a little bit based on size. And I've seen it done with other software. It's not that
Right.
bad, but
But I mean, you're just talking about adding another tier that's not really necessary from a
I
company
mean,
perspective.
I would say more it's the feature sets than the true tier. The feature sets will allow you to monetize a much larger market and thus bring in a lot more revenue and one that is tied more closely to your cost structure.
Maybe.
I mean,
Is
it's
it
just an
is it
idea.
though? Is
I
somebody
think so.
scrolling through Twitter as like just viewing, just consuming? Does that cost more than the people who actually are posting on Twitter?
Um,
I don't know.
I don't think so. It's more that it's done a lot more. And you're
Okay.
already monetizing the people posting to some degree with Twitter Blue as it stands.
Right.
So I'm just saying monetize the up. You're
But I just
monetizing the up, monetize the down as well.
yeah, I so there's two things. One, I don't think that that's a priority for them. If it was my business, it wouldn't be a priority for me.
Okay.
I would I would be more paying attention to how do I maximize the best user experience for everyone as it currently sits, which is what they really need to do, get more efficient, which I think is part of this whole throttling thing, is you're not losing the efficiency of people being able to data scrape.
Yeah. I mean, it's the
And
problem is it's going to be
it seems like
trying to.
that's what they're really trying to attack with this whole throttling thing.
Yeah. I I I don't know that you're getting into very fact specific information. I just don't know.
Right.
But that seems reasonable.
And
Uh,
so I don't disagree. I think that something along the lines of what you're talking about that you could do that would be maybe half price. It's like $4 a month. You don't get the edit feature, but what you do get is you can have multiple different timelines, which means you could have instead of just having the I don't remember what they have now. They have the following, and then they have like the
The
for you,
for you, yeah.
whatever. You could have multiples of those where you could have one that is strictly just your crypto. If you're into crypto, you could have crypto Twitter on that one. And then if you have this one, then this is politics and news. And then this one is, and you could have that, and that might make sense. Um, but I think you're going to fall into having an issue where people, one, don't know how to, as we talked about before, they don't know how to curate their info environment. So that's only really um, applicable to a certain demographic who is going to want to curate their info environment.
I guess I'm assuming that if someone's using Twitter that much, they have, but that's probably not fair. Or they've done it more. I don't know what the people are that consume Twitter that voluminously.
I don't know the answer to that. What I do
So,
know is that the people that I have talked to that I would consider normies, they do not curate their info environment at all.
oh yeah, that I'm
They
very
don't
much
know
aware of.
how to do it. They don't understand why they should do it. They don't realize the value in it.
They don't
And
even know they
so,
have an info environment.
right. I mean, I think I don't know how many people you follow on Twitter. I know that I only have like 60 people total that I follow on Twitter. Some of them don't really put much out there, right? But when they do, I find it worthwhile, so I want them in my feed so that I can pick that up.
Yeah.
It I would I'd have to do a search to find out, but I bet most people's Twitter is uh, let's call it more robust, where they have way more people that they're following.
Well, I think a
Because if you
lot
think
of
about it, when
people.
you sign up, they're pushing you to not necessarily creators as much as they are to like personalities.
Well, and I think a lot of people use the follow to train the algorithm and go primarily on the for you page or
Hmm.
whatever. I am almost exclusively on the following page.
Right.
Um, I,
It's the
I
only thing I
I'm like,
use.
what is all this crappy noise? Oh, I'm actually on the for you page.
Yeah. I mean, I got pissed whenever they switched. They changed something in the algorithm or
And it
in the
defaulted.
app so that it defaulted to the for you tab. And so like the people that I follow and people like us, like we were like, whoa, whoa, turn that shit off. I don't care about that. I have the people I'm following because I want to see what they have to say. I don't care about
Yeah.
all these other people out there in the ether. I you know I
No,
just
I
like
mean,
I don't care what Ray J is doing this week or who Kim Kardashian's married to now. It doesn't make a damn to me.
right. I will say it's gotten better since Elon took over. The for you page is a lot more applicable. I have found some decent
Cool.
follows that way, but it's still way too
Never
noisy.
even looked at
Didn't intentionally look at it.
it. Never.
I just like, what? This is an interesting
No.
tweet. I don't remember following this person. Oh, I'm not following anybody. Okay, and
But
then follow and then switch. But yeah, no, I think that's fair. But and that I think Elon is trying to make some changes and guide some changes and does seem to be doing better. So it could just be he knows better than me. Like I don't have any information. So you could very well be right that I'm
I mean, I'm
jumping the
just looking
gun.
at it from a business perspective of what it would take to put those things in without knowing what that payback's going to be and who's going to be willing to sign up for it. So it makes more sense from a business perspective to, you know, increase your efficiency first.
Well, and I, from a tech perspective, I somewhat disagree because I think the issue I see the problem as he needs more money to make the network more robust, and so the cost of these features from a tech perspective may not be that high. It may be copying, pasting existing services and cloning them into new ones. I'm guessing here without being able to see the code base or anything.
Right.
And maybe the problem is that the code base is so jacked up that it because he did say that this is a garbled mess, which I believe.
Hmm.
Um, that as a result of that, they can't make those quick changes. That could very well be. But
Right.
so we're at this point. I think we're just guessing about guessing.
Yeah. I,
So
like I say, I'm just saying from like a business perspective what I look at.
sure.
Now, I could be wrong because, I mean, obviously Twitter's not necessarily something I would have started or a business I would have gone into, but so far be it for me to say what that should be. But
Well,
speaking of Twitter, Twitter
the
seems to be the only place that you can find any information as to what's going on in France right now.
I mean, I wouldn't know because I don't really look anywhere else. I mean, Twitter's the start. It's not the end, but it's the start of me learning things. I don't know where else to start because
It's not coming up on any
any
of my other
legal
feeds. It's
like
not
what?
showing up, huh?
Like what other feeds
It's
do
not
you
showing up on YouTube, as
okay.
far as like in the feed. And I'm talking about like main stuff. It's not showing up on Facebook. It's not kicking into my feed in Facebook.
Okay.
Um, because I just glance at them to see what they're doing.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't I don't
and so
really use Facebook.
and then everybody that I'm seeing on Twitter is saying like, why is the mainstream not talking about this? Like, why
I
is
think we
CNN and
know.
Fox are not? I know we know. I'm just saying, like, that's the thing that they're saying, and so that leads me to believe that. And these are people that I mean, like I could go check CNN, but I'm not. I don't have time to. Well, I don't have TV, so I
I
couldn't watch
mean,
CNN if I wanted to. I could go online and check their website, check Fox's website, but
they
you
may
know,
have some articles that they're writing about saying, see, we totally posted about that, but they just
yeah.
don't promote it at all.
And
Um,
instead, all like most of the major cities in France are on fire right now. Like they're burning.
is it outside of Paris? I haven't
Oh
seen
yeah.
much indicating. Oh,
Oh yeah. So Paris is where it started. So for those who don't know, there was an incident where an um, a young man of I think Algerian um,
it's probably
background. He was either I don't know what the whole story behind it was, but basically they pulled him over. He had like I guess like stolen a car, was doing something. He didn't have a driver's license, so they tried to get him out of the car. He decided to gun it while there's like a French police officer on the hood. Like launches the guy onto the hood, and he's like there now, and the cop ends up like shooting him so that he doesn't kill the cop by running into something because he can't see. This started an just absolute crap show of protests across Paris, and it has since spread from Paris to Marseille to Lyon, and last I saw, it's now in Switzerland.
no.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
this is what
I
fired
want
all this off. That's how this got started. Um,
Switzerland's going to be
it's
interesting.
out there. The thing that's really sketchy right now is that these protesters have broken into French armories and are now armed with semi-automatic and what appears to be belt-fed weapons.
Lord, I have seen what you have done for others, and but no, I
Bless you, my child.
uh the that's crazy.
Yeah,
Like that, I'm curious what Switzerland does because they're a little different up there. Like the Swiss are sort of isolated in the mountains, and so they kind of don't really they deal with all of Europe's shit kind of from afar.
the problem is I don't. Here's
But
what
it's
I
been
think that
changing.
you're going to run into is that all of these countries in this area, if you'll remember a few years back, there was a huge immigration issue in Europe, and they just took in everybody all the time. This, I mean, like I knew about this, God, this was years ago, would have been 2012. I actually met a French couple while I was vacationing in Peru, and they were talking about how it had gotten bad because people had so many of these immigrants had moved in and were just like they're not assimilating, they're not becoming part of the culture, and they don't believe in the state of that, like they don't have that cohesiveness. And
Well,
so
they don't believe like
they were
the
creating
state
all
doesn't
sorts of
represent them.
issues. Right.
The state doesn't
That's
represent them in their own minds, and so the state does not have their consent to govern. And so,
well, and on top of that, they only want free stuff. Like
well, I want free.
they have this yeah,
Who
they
doesn't
have
want free stuff?
they have an entitlement mindset where it's like, oh well, have you seen some of the houses? And like I've seen people like taking pictures of like where this housing is and and they're like, what are they complaining about? Like they're in the suburbs. It's like some of the nicest stuff. They gave them all sorts of really fancy living arrangements, and now they're just pissed about it because it's not good enough. Like this isn't the ghettos of Chicago and Detroit, you know, like
I
that's
think
not what this is like. This is nice.
it's people say that there is sort of a myth, particularly on the left, that uh, the problem is inequality and poverty are one and the same, and I think that is absolutely horribly wrong, and it exhibits the absolute problem with that, because the problem is not poverty. It's in the sense because it implies that poverty is relative, and that is dumb. Poverty poverty is just like generally how much you're struggling. That's more of an aspect of opportunity, right? Like they're demanding free stuff probably because they feel like that's the only way they can get it, because they feel like they don't have opportunities. They don't have opportunities because they're not integrated into society, so they can't leverage the social networks, right? They don't integrate into French culture,
I
so
don't
they're fighting French culture, right?
that right. I so the way
So in
I
order to succeed, they have to displace French culture.
eh, yeah, I mean I think that's kind of the way they think. The only argument I would have with what you stated was that they're not being integrated. They're choosing not to. I would make that distinction. Whereas like you have
Yeah,
in Sweden, like one of the issues that Sweden had is that Sweden brought in a bunch of immigrants, but then they like put them in their own city away from everybody else and was like, here, y'all go over there. And look, we took people in instead of, no,
but that's
no,
how.
like come and live amongst us and
But
do that. But that's not how Paris is, from what I understand.
I mean, it's I say they're not being integrated because that's people tend not to naturally integrate if they have a choice because it's hard. They it's somewhat painful. You have to give up a little bit of your culture and embrace a new one.
Sure.
It's hard. So you have to kind of be like forced to do so in the sense of like enforce monogamy in the cultural sense, not like necessarily the legal sense.
Well, I mean, you have to be flexible, right? Like you have to be open to new ideas and willing to do new things. And like one of the
Yeah,
things that I see is that they're just not willing to do that. And part of it is like they just they're not doing anything. And like there have been some Middle Eastern countries, some Islamic leaders that have come out and made some statements like, "Hey, y'all came to the West, America, more specifically, I think they stated, but y'all came to our countries and wanted to impose your way of life, the way that you wanted to live on our countries, and what you imported from us was the worst of our society, the people we wanted to get rid of, the ones we wanted to put in jail, the ones that we wanted to put behind bars because they were problematic, and you just imported them into your country. Like I don't feel bad for you because you got what you
yeah. I
what
mean,
you were
it's
playing for. So have
people
fun."
people gave Donald Trump a lot of credit for saying they're not sending their best. Of course they're not. Every country wants to keep their best. No one's like the people that leave are almost never the best. Like you see some of that with Americans simply because they can attribute a bunch of wealth and then go somewhere. The best of us can go somewhere else and take that wealth with us.
Ooh, that sounds like a hell of an idea. I'm just no, no.
Yeah.
I think you're right to a certain extent, but I mean, like you see that we used to have a real bad problem that people, different countries actually had issues with what the U.S. was doing with regards to what is it, the HB1 visas,
Yep.
because we were actually pulling some of the best and brightest, and we were creating
Yeah.
brain drain in some of these countries because people weren't going back
Boo-hoo.
because the opportunities were here. Well, now that's changed.
Yep.
Those people are going back. And you know what you're starting to see, the people that are immigrating here, they're not like this whole like that they're you know that they're refugees. They're not refugees, they're economic migrants. They want work, they want to get paid, and they
They're
want
going to
free
claim to be
stuff.
refugees, sure, because it's
Well,
you
yeah,
get better chance of immigration status if you do that. It's
right. No, no, I'm just making sure that I'm being clear for people who are listening. Like that's
oh no
not,
no, I'm just saying
these
like
people
this is
say that that's what they're doing. That's not what they're doing.
yeah. Of
And the
course they're
people
going
that
to
are
say
coming
that.
is they're like, oh yeah, they're you know we're gonna get they're telling them, oh yeah, if you go, you're gonna get free healthcare and you're gonna get free food and they're gonna get free housing. Well, guess what? We don't want the people that come here that want all this free stuff. We want people that just like if you want an opportunity and you want to work for it, I'm okay with that. Like those are the people I'd like to have here, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to work hard, you're going to contribute to society, you're going to pay taxes. I think you need to do it legally. I don't think that I think that if you do it illegally, that should bar you from being able to work legally in this country for a decade.
No, I
Period.
would like to see like if you come in here illegally, it is like your path to citizenship is now garbage. The path to
Sure.
citizenship for you and your family is much harder,
Right.
much
No,
much
I
harder.
I yeah, I'm good.
And but also we need to have a path to legal citizenship that encourages, enforces, and verifies American values.
Right.
Like if you hold American values already and you believe in them, and that's what you like about our country, then welcoming them into the country seems like a good idea.
And the other key is like you have to do that within reason. Like there's a reason that we have limits on stuff.
Oh
It's
yes.
because the infrastructure alone can't handle it.
Oh,
And we
I
can't
mean,
build the infrastructure fast enough. So,
I think it needs to be a absolute limit on immigration, and it needs to be like we need to prioritize based on the quality of the immigrant, basically. I mean that in the sense of like how much they are going to be contributing to society in both the literal productive sense, but also the um, like cultural sense, like
sure.
reinforcing versus eroding American values.
Right.
And some of that you have to figure out exactly what are the American values, but I think I don't think some of them are obvious, others less so.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm of the opinion right now that we need to just pause all immigration for like if we were taking 1 million people a year, right? And we decide, you know what, 2 million is probably a better number. We want to double that or even triple that, say 3 million a year. Well, we've like in the last few years, and like we've gone way past that. Okay, well if that's the case, then we need to like you put all immigration on hold for 5 years. Like, sorry.
Yeah, and maybe you say, oh well, there's token exceptions, so that means effectively 10,000 people get in per year instead of a
Well, I mean,
million.
I think that there are that's and so let's be clear. That's for people who want that are like economic migrants,
Right,
right?
right,
If you like if like say, say we had a friend that we know that happened to find a wife overseas, he wanted to bring her back here. I think
right,
that's an exception and that doesn't fall under that same category because
right. If
of
you
that.
like,
But
there's certain things I'd like to see be easier to at least get a permanent resident. Like if you're living overseas and you married somebody and you wish to come back, you shouldn't have to break up the family to do that.
Right.
Now there's certain things where it's like you don't want to have people, selling uh, marriage certificates for the U.S. for the sake of like that in
They're doing
itself
that
is a
anyway.
loophole. What's that?
They're doing that anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, you want to make it a little more difficult.
I mean, I think there's the like I think that that it should be very clear that if you well, and this is actually an option, they just never exercise it. Is that like if you divorce like you get married, get American citizenship, and you get divorced, they can withdraw your citizenship. They can revoke your U.S. citizenship, and
I
I
mean,
think they should.
I
Like, here's
think
the deal: like, don't you need to understand? And I think this goes to a conversation we've had previously. Like, you don't get to have that. Like, have your cake and eat it too. Know what you're getting into in the contract you're signing, because if you decide, oh well, I don't want to be with him anymore, and I'm going to divorce him, and then I can just stay here, that ain't the case. We're going to revoke your citizenship. You're going to get it,
right.
deported back to wherever you came from. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be pretty easy to get a permanent residency. As like, I almost think that as if you were married to an American citizen during the course of the marriage, you should have almost automatic status for permanent residency.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Um, and the problem is currently you don't.
Right.
That's more what I'm thinking. As far as citizenship goes, I'm like, okay, well, it should be a process. You should it should be something like making contingent on being married seems to make sense. If that was the path to citizenship, then if it dissolves, then you go back to if you've been living in the States for a while, maybe you can get to be a permanent resident, but you could also that can be revoked based on
Well,
your conduct.
I think you would have to apply for permanent residence if you get divorced and marriage
Yeah.
was your path to citizenship, your citizenship's going to be revoked. You have X number of days to
Yeah.
because
No,
the divorce process is not a slow process or not a
no,
fast
no.
process. Sorry. Anyways, but it's not a fast process. So you've got time. So
Yeah.
you need to be applying for and knowing that your citizenship's going to be revoked.
Sure. And yeah, you have to apply for
So
permanent
you need to
residency.
apply for permanent residence, and that will be taken on a case by case basis. And
I mean, I
maybe you
kind of
maybe you get to keep, maybe you get it, maybe you don't. Maybe you get a temporary residence permit.
yeah. I mean, I guess my thought would be, and I guess you're right, case by case, depending on how long have you been here, how have you conduct, like, were you a citizen in good standing?
Sure.
That and duration. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, how long have you been here? I think is
Right.
a, a reasonable item to look at.
But I
You
mean, I
know,
think we're just
what
getting
is,
into
huh?
we're just getting into like more
Oh yeah.
marriage law stuff. I mean, there's a lot we could happily talk about this for a while, but I think the Paris stuff like that, kind of getting back to it, what,
Dude, that's coming.
man, like that's a playbook for here like
That's 2024 US. Like,
this
let's call
is
shots right now.
yep,
Bet
summer
money
2024. 1 year from now is it? Oh yeah, the timing.
right before the election.
1 year from now, you could see very similar stuff in the States.
Yep.
This is maybe not an overt playbook, but it's the direction their playbook is taking us.
Correct.
It's this is the problem of a non-integrated foreign culture taking roots.
Hmm.
And it's I mean some people talk about it being we have a multicultural democracy inside of a constitutional republic, and that's our current problem. I I wonder if the problem is straight up a true multicultural democracy because I do not know that there is anything cohesive holding a multicultural democracy together. Without coherent and consistent culture, what makes you a single people?
Historically, there's never been.
And there's I can conceptually I don't know how you have that. Now France is something different where you actually have it's not really a multicultural environment. It's just a separate Islamic culture, distinct from the
Oh
French
yeah,
culture,
right,
and it's taking over. I mean, this is actually how um, countries came up, new countries, true countries, new truly new peoples even came into existence. Is that you would have people, migrants, people move across, and then they start globbing and settling on together in a region and form a new people in the sense
right.
of
But that would,
cultural values and all.
yeah, but that's not going to happen here.
I mean,
That's not what this is. Because
no,
here's the other
no,
thing:
I'm saying
the
it's
Europe has this problem throughout the vast majority of Europe, where they
my,
have.
right. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it's given that like it can't happen because we're too crowded. Because there's not like empty land where no one was living that these new people could settle in.
Oh no, that's not true.
And I there's everything is kind of claimed. You're going to run into people almost immediately.
Okay,
But
so to a certain extent, yes, right? Like, but at the same time, there are vast swaths of most countries that are fairly uninhabited.
yes, but if you, I mean, and there are some places where small communities can pop up
So,
where you could pop up before, like no one exercises the rule of law there, but there's not many, and they're small in terms of the amount of people they could hold before someone goes in and tries to exercise their legal authority over them.
I mean, to yeah,
But
sure, but I mean, like you can have that. That's fine, but you have the same. You have the ability. You could literally, if you wanted to, move to France, find a spot that is not highly populated. If you have a culture or a group of people who are of the same culture, they would they could move into that area and then they could just say, "Hey, we're our own country now."
what do you think is happening?
That's not what's happening.
I
But
mean, what's the
they're
difference?
they're now having to, well, because right now what you're going to have is you have there's well, first let's start with this. With this, you could do that. That can happen. If you look at the US, we have that. We have the Amish and the Mennonites who kind of they operate outside of the
Yeah, kind of. I mean, they're
government.
done like they butt heads with the government frequently, and
Sure,
and only they're
they do.
only basically allowed to do so simply because of existing restraints on the government.
Right. And they only do so because they stay, they basically stay within their own community and they don't cause problems to the larger communities, to
So
communities
they're
around them,
vassal states of the United States, basically.
essentially.
Yeah.
But you see
Um,
this in Central and Eastern Europe a lot. I mean, like, look at the Czech Republic and what happened there in the 90s, right? You had the same kind of thing go on, and what happened? Civil war, everybody's fighting each other. These are the things that you're going to see happen. The problem that you've got right now, what's happening in France, is that this is in major cities. And so these are major population areas, which means now you have two major populations that are competing for the same resource. And that's where you're going to have serious problems.
oh
Whereas
yes, no, it,
if you just took a group of people into rural France and said, hey, this is ours now, and hey, we're gonna just live here and do things, you don't have this interaction, you don't have this strife that you're having now.
right
That's where you're gonna
because you're
have
not.
that. They're gonna have to tear down all of the old in order to build the new.
Well, and that's part of the issue that this happens when you do so within a socialist style setting. And I don't mean socialist in like the economic structure. I mean socialist in that you have a very strong um, pooling of resources,
Right.
which just happens in cities where you're using public transportation, public accommodation, the public availability of stuff. That becomes where now you're competing over the same resources provided by a representative structure. And so now they're trying to leverage that representative structure to gain more control over the resources. And they're doing so. It's war. It's war. It was fifth generational warfare, but it's fifth generational warfare. That means that you incorporate the past 4 generations as well. And we are currently looking at something like third or fourth right now. Things are on fire.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens whenever tensions go hot.
Yeah, and
So
it's
anybody in the U.S. who's talking about like, oh, well, blah blah blah, you just remember, this is what you're asking for. And I know you think that it sounds good. I promise you, what's going to come out of France, if this continues, which I haven't seen today, what's going on, because typically I think that the rule is like 3 to 5 days, and if it goes beyond that, it's going to be real bad, real
yeah.
bad.
I mean,
But I saw the
it's
other day they stole a tanker. I saw another video where they took a guy out of his truck and just stole the truck,
I
like
heard
not like an 18-wheeler truck.
did is there confirmed? I heard somebody was found to be defending themselves, and they hauled him out and cut off his hands.
Yeah, I haven't confirmed that. I heard that from
Like that's
reputable sources.
yeah. It's the whole like they're not just they're like it. It's something where I don't. I best case scenario they bottle this back up to deal with it again later. If or like that's how I see. Unless they want to put this down. But if they're going to stop this sort of right, their current actions have said that rebellion is somewhat acceptable. If they want to say rebellion is bad and you cannot rebel like this, as they should, because this is just an unacceptable behavior for anybody,
Yeah.
they're going to have to go in and start shooting people. It doesn't start that way, but it's inevitable.
Yeah, you have to nip this in the bud, because you hit the nail on the head, man. Like if they just get it back under control and they don't do something to remedy and rectify this situation, all you're doing is putting the top back on the bottle, waiting for it to explode again. That's
I
it.
mean, like you need to find the people that like you're going to need to hang people.
I think they use guillotines in France.
I hope so. That would be so much better. Um, I don't think so, but no,
Well, they used to,
yeah, I know.
historically anyway.
It's times are coming. They mean to bring it back. The it's like the people that cut off this guy's hands. Those guys need to be made. They need to get harsh sentences, and they need to be made an example of
Yeah.
because you cannot. That's particularly I don't say egregious, but dangerous to the state because it represents the core of an opposing structure. And so you need to say that no, you do not get to impose a foreign structure. And I don't mean, I'm not saying that this is coming from Algeria or whatever, but it's certainly alien to France. It is not something that comes out of France. It comes from somewhere else.
No, this is something that is fairly common in Islamic law.
Right. And I'm saying it's not I'm not saying it's not foreign in the sense of belonging to a
Right.
single country. It's just
No,
foreign is not belonging to
it's
France.
not.
And
It
so,
is not the law of France. That's
right.
not how we do things. And they either have to step up and say, this is not going to be acceptable. We're not going to tolerate this, or I mean, it's game over. What's interesting to me is I saw um, there was a guy who they labeled him as a far rightist or a nationalist or something like that, who has been evidently fairly outspoken in the past. He came forward and put something out there, and it's like it was a short video telling everybody like, hey, stand down. The
Yeah.
police need to do this. They need to take care of this, and we need to stay out of it, because if we
He's
get
right.
involved, they're going to make it look like we're the bad guys and look at what we did and how racist we are and all this other stuff. Stay out of it. Let the police handle it. If they don't, then
He's right.
it'll destroy the it'll destroy the structures. It is what it
And
is.
and when and that happens
And
here, same thing.
Yeah, and exactly. I think this is a message that everybody needs to take to heart because we're going to see this stuff again. Now, I'm not saying don't protect your
Oh no,
individual home or neighborhood or friends, family, that kind of stuff,
yeah,
but do not go out and actively engage in trying to stop this kind of behavior because what will happen is that you will be demonized. And if you don't believe me, go look at Austin, Texas, and go look at New York City.
like yeah, just watch the news for a bit.
I mean,
It's well, not the actual news. Go on Twitter.
well, I mean, you
It's
see the guy in New York who there's that
Daniel Penny and Daniel
Daniel,
Perry.
right, that protected people from a violent person, so violent and so egregious that two other people helped him to restrain this man. The guy ends up dying, and now he's charged with murder.
Yeah,
Why would
be
I get
aware.
involved?
You
Have
do not
fun.
have. They do not think you have the right to self-defense.
Correct.
That is how you need to remember this. So have a plan to extract your family when the cities are on fire. It's gonna come. Um, you need to be aware that if you defend yourself, you are the police, possibly the police in your own state are going to consider you enemy.
Hmm.
Act accordingly, but have a plan.
Yeah. Do not do not think that the police are on your side. They're not.
No,
I
if
don't care how
you're
much you
if
act the
you
blue. I don't care how
if
many stickers you've got on the back of your car. They're still going to arrest you and throw you in jail. And it's
and
not going to be, and at past that, it's not going to be up to them. It's going to be up to the district attorney, who most likely is against you.
right, and keep in mind that you may like and believe trust your local sheriff, but when the indictment in New York comes down for murder, your sheriff is probably just going to say, yeah, well, you killed a guy and it was murder, so I'm going to have to send you back up there. And
Hmm.
he's not gonna fight for you. He's not. Do not like I hope he does. And there are some sheriffs out there that know what time it is and will fight for you, but most won't. Most will
Right.
see there's a murder charge in New York. I'm going to help them extradite.
Yeah.
And that if you don't think if you think that you're like that's going to happen with your state AG or your DAs, like they're all going to help extradite you to wherever they need to.
Maybe. The other thing is you need to go look at who your state AG is, who your local
Yes,
AGs are,
yes,
right? Those look at who they are, who's who they support, who's supporting them, and where the money that they get to uh, campaign, where that money's coming from. Like that's the reality. You need to be aware of those things so that you can be prepared when the time comes. Now, I know that sounds like some really bad stuff. On a good note, we have had some really good things come out of the SCOTUS this week.
yes, yes.
Um, I think the quick and easy one was the student loan debt forgiveness that got shot down because it's funny that people forget so quickly that Nancy Pelosi, who was the speaker, said Joe Biden, like the president, does not have the ability, like they don't have the power to do this.
Oh yeah, he bought
And then
votes
he
with it.
did it anyway. And then you're surprised when it gets shot down. Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Like if you'd been paying attention, you would have known it was going to get shot down.
Right.
They knew it was going to get shut down. In fact, a lot of Biden edicts, they know they're going to get shut down. But if it works for that brief period of time before it gets shut down, hooray! And in this case,
It's just
working was
buying
buying
votes.
votes. Yes,
Right.
it was buying votes.
What's interesting is I actually saw a meme about that. Said somebody was pissed about, and this goes all the way back to the election of 2020. And I'm trying to remember what the guy said. It was like somebody was mad, and they were like, "Hey, man, we all voted for Biden so that we could get $2,000 stimulus checks, not 1,400. And somebody replied to him, and I think this was probably a Twitter thread that was screenshotted. But it was like, hey, pro tip: whenever you're taking a bribe for your vote, make sure you get payment in advance, like,
Yep.
because that's what it was. And so was this. Like this was announced right before midterms,
Oh yes, it was.
right?
It was way too timely to miss.
And so it was like, oh, okay, so I can see exactly what you're doing here.
It's like September or
And
October. Yeah.
but it also gives them the opportunity to be like, well, I was trying to, alleviate some of your student loan debt,
Right.
but the mean old meanies wouldn't allow me to. Well, you know what? I'm sorry, but here's the deal. Adulting and life is hard. When you borrow money, you need to pay it back.
And
That's the
and,
reality.
and look, I get in some cases these were very predatory loans. I've heard cases where you've got people that were like they the university kind of implicitly worked with the lending group to kind of basically say, oh, you want your degree? Okay, you're going to have to get another $50,000 in loan because you've already got like $150,000 in loans, and you're going to need to get another $50,000. But on top of that, in order to get it, you're going to get still another $50,000 because we just don't have enough room in this classes or whatever.
Oh yeah,
And
there's definitely some shady things that are going on. I mean, if you look at it, university education costs have skyrocketed, and if you do them if you do the regression on it, that correlates with when they put into place student loan and financing availability for all.
yeah,
And so a um, whenever there is a plethora of money, somebody's going to try to figure out how they can get as much, if not as much of it as possible, whenever
right.
they're doing that. And then I hate to burst people's bubble here, but there was something that happened in 1995. Any guesses? There was a
I
piece of legislation that went through that was championed by none other than Joe Biden, that made student loan debt
oh
non-dischargeable
in
through
bankruptcy. Yep.
bankruptcy.
Oh God, yes. That
He's who did that to you. So
it's
if you want to
basically
be mad at somebody, be mad at him, because he
he
made
turns
it
into
so
slaves.
that, yeah. And so from 1995 to current day, you watch the cost of college skyrocket.
It's just
Because if
indentured
you think about
servitude
it,
with extra steps.
right, if you think about it if you go back, like, okay, yeah, you can, why would I, if I'm going to loan you money, like, I want to make sure that you're going to be able to pay me back. And hey, like, it's a cost benefit analysis. Like, what's the danger here? What's the counterparty risk?
Well,
Hey, look,
it's
I'm not going to loan you money for a degree in gender studies that I don't think is going to pay off, versus this dude over here who's going to be an engineer that I know that we're short on, and they're going to make $100,000 a year. Like, it just
all
doesn't. It makes sense.
all of the market forces that would normally correct those things have been removed.
Hmm.
So the evaluation on which degrees you should get. Well, if you can't get a job with it, you're not going to pay me back. Then I wouldn't be lending to you. So you can get whatever degree you want. Oh, you're
Hi,
not going to pay it back? Well, you're just going to be more indentured.
I'm from
That's
the
not a problem for
government,
me.
and I'm here to help.
Oh God, it's a Halloween costume, scariest one there is.
I
Um,
don't know about the scariest, but it's,
but up there.
yeah. But yeah, that's the reality on that one, right?
Well,
Um,
and I get it. If you want it, if you say this is a blatantly uh, predatory lending practice, that's fine. I agree with you. Stop giving them out. Do that first.
how well? I mean,
Stop.
I,
If you say this is a
I,
predatory loan practice, why are you not saying we need to stop giving out student loans?
yeah, you need to halt the, you need to cut off the issue first, right?
Yeah. Like if you're saying that this is bad, we shouldn't have done it. Okay, stop doing it.
Yeah. And I think we should stop backing loans. I think that the U.S. government should stop backing loans
Yeah, I don't think that there should be any federally protected student loans. I cannot think of a good reason for it other than you have this
to
innate
loan
feeling
way
that,
too much money to the wrong people that aren't going to ever be able to pay it back. And so, in order
well,
to,
no, I mean it's more of a, you just feel that you have this innate feeling that education is important, but you can't define any of the terms involved.
right,
Importance, education, like,
feeling.
well, I'm yeah.
Sorry, you walked into that one. So, yeah, I mean, like that's the deal, right? And so the other one, I think I don't have a lot of information on. I haven't looked into it really strongly, but I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
got some really good. It's going to set some really good precedents. Is the frame and receiver rule, the ATF frame and receiver rule. This really corresponds to like Polymer 80 companies like that who sold 80% lowers that you could basically finish at your house. You know, people will tell you that, oh, it's easy. You can turn it into from a piece of plastic and 80% into a firearm in 30 minutes. Well,
Once you get good at it, probably.
if you're good at it, maybe. If you're really good at it or you have all the right tools, potentially. Um, like I have a lot of tools and I may have tried one of those and have never gotten one to function well. That's just the
Yeah, I mean
reality.
that's the reality is machining is hard. Precision machining is harder.
Right.
And that's the part of what makes guns work well is precision machining. Now, some designs are more tolerant than others, but like it's I don't know if you've watched Brandon Herrera's AK-50 video, but you look at some of the early stuff and you're like, that piece is wonky as, like, it is not plumb true, it is not square, it is not,
Duh.
but it still kind of works.
But AK is fine.
Right. That's it. Like AR-15 was not designed in that manner,
No.
and it's
AR design was designed on precision manufacturing and super tight tolerances, and that's why if you get stuff in them, they stop working. AKs
yeah,
are designed with a lot more open tolerances. Now, given you can get an AR that's accurate to 600 plus yards, no problem.
right.
An AK
Precision
is not
machining
gonna
means
do that.
right. Precision machining means
But
precision shooting. Like
the
that's
other
how you
thing,
get precision shooting.
the other thing is most people, that's a mid-range weapon. I don't care if it's AR or AK. You're probably not shooting it at 600 yards vast majority of the time. Most incursions are going to be under
Right.
100.
Right.
Like you just
Yep.
can't, most people just can't see that far. And I mean, unless you're, well, in fairness, we were in a desert for a long time. And, but unless you're in a desert where there's open area, like if you're fighting close quarters where you can't see a long distance, take jungles of Vietnam, say use in the forested areas of Ukraine currently.
Yeah. I mean,
Like it's just it doesn't matter. There's no reason to have a gun that shoots 600, and
well,
it's more advantageous to have a firearm that will fire every time you pull the trigger because your life could depend on it.
it was a little different in the mountains of Afghanistan, and mountain where you get more longer sight lines and
Sure.
such, like kind of like the mountains of Appalachia, but just something to consider. um, but yeah, I mean,
Seems scary.
it's part of a longer march towards clamping down on the ATF.
Right. Well,
Um,
the reality is that these things have been approved by the ATF to be not firearms
uh-huh.
and thus not subject to ATF for years. And then the ATF came along and said, nope, you know what? They are now. And people challenge that. And where this is going to come up, there's another case that actually there's like two or three at least cases that are going through. I know
Well, the
Gun Owners of America has got one.
talking about the
Firearms
brace.
Policy Coalition has got one. Um, and those are the two big ones that I'm aware of. and that's for pistol braces, which have been approved for use for
Well,
over
and
a decade, and
it's
they're just trying to relabel them, and I think that's going to get shot down too. So I
oh
think
it
this is a good precedent for that event
this
in the
might be
future.
referenced in a new brief, um, because yeah, this is a part of an ongoing clamping down on all government agencies. In fact, what you've seen in the last decade or so has been clamping down on the first ones were primarily FDA cases, where the food less the drug, but and some of it was also the EPA, and it was
Hmm.
basically talking about how these like there's a West Virginia coal miner one, and I don't know if you remember the
There was an EPA water
yeah,
rights one that was they classified somebody's property as wetlands,
right.
even though every other lot that was in that area had a house built on it. And
Hmm.
so they had gotten their plans, they'd gotten all their permits and everything else, and EPA said, "Oh no, that's we're classifying
Wetlands
that as
now.
wetlands." But there was like a lake over here somewhere, and there was like a intermittent creek that's like on the other side of the road, and that's how they were like, "Oh well, it's watershed." Like so we can classify it as wetlands and keep you from building on it. And those people ended up suing the EPA and won.
Yep. I mean,
And so yeah,
it's
there's several of them. That's just one that I happen to know about.
it's an ongoing trend with at least the current Supreme Court, or at least with the last decade of the Supreme Court as we know it. It's mostly been, I can't remember the ruling, but it's basically the legal term for it. I can't, oh, I almost got it. But
You thinking of a
basically,
Chevron deference?
yeah, I am. Where it's the basic idea is that if a law is vague or ambiguous or there are no definitions in the law, then traditionally the courts um, yield to the agencies, the administrating agencies' definitions, interpretations, and so on. But what this has been saying is that there's some significant limitations to that, and a lot of this is coming out to arbitrary changes of definitions. And there's no clear precedence about what limits that, but it sort of seems to be getting at like you cannot arbitrarily change these definitions, but also perhaps it's maybe limiting the degree to which they can set the definitions in the first place at all.
Right. No,
And
I agree. I think that's going to be the crux of the ATF pistol brace case,
well, and it's
because a machine gun is clearly defined in the Firearms Act of 1946, 64. I can't remember. But it was clearly defined what a machine gun is, and now they're claiming that, well, this is a machine gun now, or a short-barreled rifle, or
short,
whatever.
yeah,
Like they're doing this on a lot of different things. They're really bad about it,
yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, like I see it more of a pendulum swing.
Oh, it
I
is.
think that the pendulum has been slowly swinging one way, where the government agencies have been just expanding what their powers are as far as they can go. And I think they've like all of them just seem to be stepping over that line at the same in within the same time frame, and people are going, no, not anymore, and they're pushing back and saying this isn't. And so I
Uh,
think that's where you're seeing these lawsuits that are coming back, and a lot of it's never been challenged before. Like a lot of these things have never been challenged. Nobody's ever pushed back on it. And so the courts are like, yeah, you know what? Actually, yeah, you're right. Tell you what.
well, I think, and I would like to thank them for pushing so hard, so consistently, because I don't think it'd be as obvious what they're doing if they didn't. And you got to believe that SCOTUS and other federal judges see what they're doing.
Hmm.
They're aware on this, and then I mean, there's some significant cases challenging the Commerce Clause and how much the government really has authority to use that as a tool to regulate things,
Hello,
um,
Texas.
and how much it can be used for. I forget what the term is. Uh, it's like the I can't remember, but basically it's the fact that states can't regulate it because that's the federal territory. So you're saying this state law is um, unconstitutional because it is encroaching on federal jurisdiction in interstate commerce. I can't remember what the term is for that specific thing, but those are collectively being challenged and reinterpreted, and I'm here for it.
I mean, Texas has got one right now in the courts. It's the Texas suppressor law.
Yep.
So basically, the gist of it is that uh, you know the NFA, National Firearms Act, requires you to, if you want a suppressor, to file paperwork, fill out a tax, pay a tax, to get a tax stamp, to be able to own that. And the way they got away with it was through the Commerce Clause. And so somebody in Texas, and I think there's a couple of others that are actually doing this as well, have said, okay, well, if if there's a suppressor that is made in Texas, sold in Texas, and is never transferred outside the state of Texas, kept here, used here, then it's not subject because it's not interstate commerce. And there's arguments on both sides of that on how that can, like, well, it can be interstate commerce because of this and that, and it affects the economy and it affects this, and okay, well, that's fine. You can make that argument, but it seems pretty straightforward that if
I mean,
it's
it's
made, manufactured, and stays within the state of Texas borders, that it's outside the purview of the federal government. Like that's
and I think there's a fair amount of they want to delay this because it's going to be incredibly impactful if it's overturned
oh,
because it is
it it'll gut the
it'll
NFA.
or gut a lot of things. It'll gut
Yeah,
a lot of things. I really hope they pass it. I don't think they're inclined to simply because I'm say pass it, but um, rule in favor of the suppressor, but the rule in favor of Texas. The
by the way, I'm going to make a call right now. It'll go to SCOTUS, and if it does, they're going to they're going to choose not to take it up.
I think you might be right. I think that's one of
Historically,
those.
that's what they do when they don't want to address something that is could be unpopular. Like they just go, "Oh, that's not
I,
one of the cases we're going to take this year."
I'm not even sure it's unpopular. I think it's more of this will break a lot of things that have been more or less functioning because it now says, oh, those rules the federal government put in place can't. Which
Right.
and here's the thing: the more that the federal government pisses them off, the more they may be like, screw you guys, I'm taking this.
Well, and here's the other part of that. You know what might happen? It could be that that they do take it up and that they do approve it because there have been a lot of calls after the SCOTUS decisions that came out this week of people saying it's time we need to expand the court.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
what you're
that's what I
doing
mean.
is you're basically threatening the court that you do what we want or we'll nullify your power or your strength. Okay,
One.
fine. Guess what's going to happen? That means you're not going to win any decision from now moving forward as long as I have a say in it. If it's me, like
Well, I mean, that would
that I'm
be.
vindictive. So
I mean, I don't know how many of them have a spine. I think at least two of them have spines,
I
but
mean, Robert says.
that's say Roberts does.
I mean, some of them. There's a couple of them that do.
He's spine-ish. I think two of them are in Thomas, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's like just like I love the meme. Republicans are racist, and it's like this desired Supreme Court, and it's just all justice promise.
Yeah,
Um,
their champion of the court is
one
the yeah
and then the affirmative action one. I don't know if you've read some of the arguments there, but
this which what arguments are you talking about? Are you talking about
pro affirmative action
the
argument,
decisions or the actual arguments that were put forth in the case?
both the arguments put forward in the case
Uh-huh.
and the dissenting opinions.
The dissenting opinion I have not read in full, but
I haven't either, but I think of
Ketanji Jackson Brown's her take is rough, but guess what? That doesn't surprise me
did she go to law
because,
school on affirmative action?
well, I mean, I think she is a clear benefactor of affirmative action. I mean,
Yeah.
if I remember right, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure Joe Biden said that who he appointed to the Supreme Court was going to be a black female.
Well,
So
I
there's
look at
nothing
her.
more racist than stating specifically what somebody's skin color and what their gender is going to be, just strictly based on that alone. Now, she could have been, and she may be, you know, qualified for the job, but we'll never really know that for sure because she
Yeah.
didn't compete on merit. She was chosen based on immutable characteristics, which I think is wrong.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think she's not. I don't think she's qualified based on what I've seen from her legal reasoning, and I use that term loosely. But I
Especially in
I,
this case.
I can't. I'm not sure that I could fully tell the difference between that and just disagreeing with her. I'm pretty sure it's because she's bad at. She doesn't understand the law or doesn't care about the law. I mean, I can't. What's
Yeah,
the difference, right? If she's an activist and she knows that's wrong but doesn't care, is she bad at it?
yeah.
But
I mean, there's a definite difference there, but
right, and
the
I don't know
outcome's
that
the
could.
same.
Yeah, I don't know that I could tell the difference for sure. Um, but it's like I'm still trying to figure out what exactly they ruled as far as like, is it's limited to certain states?
Yeah, which is weird.
How?
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't.
I because that was the basis of the lawsuit. So all
Oh,
you would really need to do is bring a
then
lawsuit in these other
lawsuit.
states, and it would be based on precedent. Either the lower court's going to have to rule this way, or it's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and they're going to rule the same way, and you're going to just look. It is what it is.
I mean, the whole affirmative action thing was weird because it was almost like the Supreme Court was legislating because it was basically my history may be off on this,
Okay.
but my understanding was that this was the initial ruling was because there is a history of racial discrimination that it was reasonable then to try to revert that and undo that. It was reasonable to have reverse the discrimination in order to repair the damage.
Well, and I'd have to look because I don't know what that ruling says. My guess, if I were to guess, would be that, hey, taking this into account when granting acceptance to schools is uh, not abhorrent, but you need to do it within. It needs to be within certain
Well,
guidelines, right?
and there
It
might
needs
be
to be, and it, I think there is a difference between like saying, hey, we need to pay attention to this, and we need to figure out if we're not attracting qualified candidates to apply to this school, then we probably should look at that and see why that is.
well, I mean that's the
Now, we
general.
also shouldn't grant admissions strictly based on this. And I think one of the things that has happened, and this is the basis of this lawsuit, is that if you were white or Asian, you were being actively discriminated against for people who were either African American or Hispanic. And you could see that in the admissions numbers
Yeah.
specifically. And so they went, okay, whoa, this is way out of proportion. It's different. Like whenever you have a population that is, I mean, what is the U.S. white population? It's roughly what, 60%? The African American population I know is somewhere between like it hovers between like 11 and 15%, right?
Right. And you said it was, you think it's six, you say 65?
Something like that. I thought
Seems a little high. No,
it may be,
no, I think it's a little bit lower
but
than that. I want to say
but
it's 70 something percent.
but it doesn't really
But
matter,
yeah,
right? But the admissions rate in these cases for white students was in the like 30 or 40% range,
right.
and and let's see, the Hispanic, I don't remember what the Hispanic population like overall what the percentage of population is, but I think it's like in the kind of similar, like 20-25%, somewhere in there,
Right.
right? And their rate of admission, their admissions, like the percentage of the admissions that were Hispanic, it was like 50 some odd percent,
Right.
and African Americans was like 56 some, it's 50 again,
Right.
like
They're
these
very
were
clearly
very clearly outsized
right. It wasn't
percentages.
like we're suggest like you would have to believe that there's a inordinate amount of geniuses or something in these other racial groups
Right,
by a large amount.
right. You'd have to see
And
an absolute ridiculous disparity.
well,
Um,
I'm still just baffled
and
by
I'm
like
not saying that there's not. I'm just saying like the odds of that are freaking way low. And what's interesting is people have put forth that the actual people that are benefiting are legacies.
yeah, because they're the only
So
ones that of the lower groups that get in. And
so
the reality is that if you are promoting somebody into an educational environment that they are not qualified for, you are dooming them. You are not
well, their
helping
dropout.
them.
You can see it. You can see it in their dropout rates.
Oh yeah.
The
Well, the
dropout
failure.
rates are the fail out rates and the dropout rates in Ivy League schools for um, the African American and Hispanic populations was drastically higher than the others.
Well, I think to a point where I know some schools, I don't know about like Harvard or something, but or the Ivy League, but that they um like I think they said like we need to do something to keep them from failing out so much. And I think there was some pressure on people not to, and that's part of the whole, critical race theory idea is that you need to give them a leg up because they're struggling and it's not fair to them, which is so racist.
It's a
But
soft bigotry of low expectations.
it's not like yeah,
I
and
mean,
it's like
that's clearly what it is.
I'm
Like,
gonna give you an A because it was kind of a C paper, but you're black, so like that's so hard. I can't imagine what it's like to do this paper when you're black. Like that's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous thing to think.
yeah,
It's
which funny
super
to me.
racist.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me that this has gone on this long and that people have just ignored it because it's been very clear for a long time. There was an article probably 15 years ago um, about a Duke, I want to say it was a basketball player, it's an African American gentleman that graduated from Duke University, played basketball all 4 years, and couldn't read.
They should lose their accreditation.
Like, yeah, I mean, basically he
Like
got
if you graduated someone that couldn't read,
right.
you are not teaching people. You are not evaluating students. You are letting people through. How do we know if you've let somebody through? You should lose your accreditation.
You should lose your accreditation and you should lose all of your sports teams,
I think that might go hand in hand.
or at the very least, whatever sports team that was, because
I mean,
clearly you're valuing that sports team over what your stated goal as an institution is, which is to educate people.
Yeah, the
So if
NCAA
that's the
should
case, done.
like
You
yeah
don't get to.
yeah the NCAA should basically like we're fining you or maybe we're shutting down your like they were just coming down hard on that stuff because you are everything that they proclaim to be you're undermining.
Yeah, but nobody wants to play that game. Nobody wants to admit that that's actually what happened. Like, I think the guy, if I remember right, he was thinking that he was going to get drafted and didn't. And so
Mm,
then he sued Duke University because he had a degree but couldn't read. Now, I don't know what came of that. If I remember right, again, this has been years ago, but I think they settled with him like out of court and just like,
gave him
I
some
mean, you're
money.
talking about you paid money and swept it under the rug, guys.
Yeah, I mean that's what you
Sorry,
have to do if you're Duke. Like,
guess.
I mean, if you want to keep existing as an organization,
Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
but
what's going to be real interesting is to see what ramifications this ruling has, not in universities, but in the corporate world.
yeah, because it's basically saying this is just they blatantly said this is a 14th Amendment violation,
Hmm.
and so you can now well, and
So
that's
our
not.
so our
Can you sue
diversity,
retro
equity, and inclusion,
like
is that a violation now?
it's
Because
blatantly racist? It's
it
a 14th
sounds
Amendment.
like it is.
Like you sue them, you find out in court, and you probably will win. It's good, it's right because the fact that like your race shouldn't matter if I'm employing you unless you're a model.
The color of your skin shouldn't matter
Unless you're a model.
in 99% of jobs.
Yeah.
Like just
0.99. Like
yeah,
it's
probably. But I'm just
like
saying like in
if
most
you're
positions, it shouldn't matter if you're male or female. It shouldn't matter what the color of your skin is. It shouldn't matter what your background is, where you came from. None of that stuff should matter. It should be merit based. Can you do the job or can you not do the job? I don't
yeah, I mean
care.
there's I male and female increasingly think there might be some more value there. I tend to think that the differences between the sexes is different than the differences between the races. Um, but and it encompasses a much larger area. But in general, yeah, I'd say that's probably true.
The the data doesn't show that.
Doesn't show which.
This data doesn't show that there are greater differences between men and women.
The
You'll find more difference in background and how they grew up and what kind of family structure they had than you will in between.
I mean it in some of this I'm saying only along the areas that matter as far as accomplishing a job. But you're probably right in that
They
regard.
still
That
don't.
makes sense.
I
The
still it still doesn't justify it. It still doesn't justify
yeah,
hiring based on immutable characteristics. Now, don't get me
I
wrong.
mean, what if
I
you're
think I think that diversity is a great thing, but that should be diversity of thought
in
and
perspective?
ideas and perspective. Does you could have 10 white guys in a room that all came from different backgrounds and different areas of the country,
Right.
from super wealthy to dirt poor, and every one of them is going to have a different perspective on things. They went to
Right.
different schools, they went to different colleges, they were taught differently, they worked different ways up.
Yes.
That is going to be a diversity of thought that is going to be more efficient and effective for a company than to take somebody like all these people who are of different races, but they all grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same high school, went to the same college, took the same classes. Their diversity of thought is not going to be there because they grew
They
up
grew
in
up next to
this,
each other.
they lived the same life
Yeah.
essentially.
Well, and I guess thinking about it some more, I think you're right. Like, I think any differences that you have within male, female can easily be that apply to the job can easily be filtered out through other tests between deciding between different candidates of the same gender.
Sure.
Like the obvious one being strength and endurance. Okay, we'll just incorporate a strength and endurance test. And if you get the women that can do it, great, good for them, give them the job.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem with that.
yeah.
What was it that what was I think it was Trump that had that somebody asked a question if they some lady asked him, am I going to get paid the same? And he said, if you do the same job, you will.
Yep.
Like,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't care.
100%.
I don't care if like, let me be clear. Like I've hired two people in my
Well, it's
career, and the two people that I hired, hired a female and I hired a Hispanic male. So like and
well, you
don't get me
couldn't
wrong,
find a
like
black lesbian?
I didn't look that hard or they didn't apply. I'm not real
That
sure.
is racist.
I I
You
was
should have
looking for
looked.
the best person for the job, and don't get me wrong, like I
Well,
had some
that's
people come in that were of different races, different ages, different everything, but I don't care. Like
when it's
I grew up in the in the 90s for the most part, and at that time, like nobody gave a crap. It was really like everybody like it was kind of, I think, one of the peaks of our society where people were just like, let's just get along and realize that people are just people,
yep,
right? Doesn't matter what their skin color is, it doesn't matter what genes, like, it doesn't matter what their genitalia are. Like, people are just people. Everybody was fairly tolerant of each other, but also within a certain degree, like respectful, right?
right.
So you would find that churches were tolerant of the LGBTQ community, but as a result, they also weren't flaunting it in the churches. You didn't have an incident like what was it at Dodger Stadium, the
Right.
Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Like that like you're flaunting it in the church's face. How did
You're
you think that you're not going to get pushback and like everybody's just going to be tolerant of that?
not just flaunting it, they're mocking it.
Right. It, yes. And so that's my point. It's like in the 90s, and maybe it was just me, I didn't see that. In the late 90s, early 2000s, say 95 to '05, right?
That is.
I didn't see that kind of stuff go on. And it was like, hey, look, I accept that this is different, you're doing something different. I don't care.
But it
Like
was.
just be respectful that you're not openly mocking me or my stuff and I'll do the same to you, right? Like,
It's just it's weak people not wanting to admit they're weak. That's what caused this. It's people that looking, why didn't I get the job? Why did the white guy get the job and I didn't? And it's like, well, because you didn't have the same qualifications. That guy was more qualified. Like, well, that's because you know of racial inequities. Or it's like maybe, or
well, and
maybe it's just you didn't do as well, and you like the same reason that that other white guy you didn't see interview didn't get the job.
and here's the kicker. The problem with this affirmative action stuff that people have been doing is it's actually creating a too like additional divisiveness because
It's doing a lot more
now,
than that.
huh?
It's doing more than that. I mean,
Oh, I agree. But
it is
I mean, like, if you
disastrous.
look at it, like you can't you one you can't look at somebody who has the appearance to be a diversity hire and not have people outside look at it and go, I wonder if they were diversity hires so that they could fill the checkbox or something like that. Which to me is like that's horrible. Like, why would you treat people that way instead of just knowing that they were the like if you're not using those criteria, then you're picking the best people for the job. But whether it's a job or whether it's a university, but too many companies and universities are implicitly stating that, well, no, we need to increase our diversity, which means that's that's them saying that we're picking people based on their immutable characteristics.
Well, and
Well,
it's
that creates issues there because now those people don't know if they were actually the best for the job or if they got picked because of what their immutable characteristics are, which is not cool.
I mean it.
And then you have the other side of if you see some white dude that's like, oh yeah, all the all the Hispanics and the African Americans are stealing all the jobs. They get all the jobs and I can't get a job. And so now you're going to build like this stuff, if it continues, is going to build a racist subsection over somewhere.
It's already doing that. You can, if you talk to the right people, you'll hear it.
Oh,
And
really?
it's some of it's not even like
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
some of it's not even like blatantly racist. It's just like, well, why would I assume that they are competent when I know for a fact the
Oh
majority of
no,
people doing this
I'm
are,
talking about like openly racist. Like I'm
oh,
talking about like you're going to expand the ranks of what was a dying Ku Klux Klan.
oh
Like
yes.
that was going to like that I think is you're going to see that happen.
No,
And it's going to happen more and more when you have young men who are unemployed, and especially right now as we start heading into this recession depression, unfairly, everybody's going to be either unemployed or underemployed as a fairly
right.
large portion of the population. But when you have young men who are unemployed, who see this and go, well, if they're meeting quotas, then they're hiring other people, which means I can't get a job, so I can't make any money and I can't provide for my family. Like it creates a lot of tension
Well,
that we do not need.
and yeah, you're right in that regard. You have blatant actual racists that believe it's an immutable inherent characterization, but I don't know that I can tell the difference between somebody who is saying these things because they are doing the sort of mental statistical analysis, so to speak, where they're basically saying, well, if the majority of the black people that got into Harvard for, I don't know if the majority, but probably sounds like it is based on the statistics, got into Harvard based on affirmative action, then I can assume that the majority of black people coming out of it were not qualified to be there. And so I can now assume the majority of black people I'm interacting with in those professions are not qualified to be there.
Yeah.
And
And
it's you're just
who knows if
propagating
that's a
the
fair
statistics.
assumption or not, but
It's
that's
not wholly unreasonable, but
right.
it's one of those things that is,
It's not a good place for us to go with thought processes
no, it is right next to black people are dumb for being black. Like as being, it is
as yeah. This
like
is the
it's
same thing of like you go back to, you know, decades and centuries ago of that they were inferior somehow,
right,
which is just weird.
right. I don't I
It's like anybody who speaks a different language than you is inferior now. Like what?
right.
Like,
And
well,
it's,
that's kind of been the English milieu, but
yeah. Well, but I mean, I think it is a, I mean, it's a nasty top. It's a nasty event, and I think
oh,
it's
it's
something that
horrible.
I don't understand why people don't get this.
Yeah, I mean, I
I
don't like it. I
well,
don't like.
but I don't understand why people do not look at this and see. So if we're hiring, like hiring qualified people is hard. Most people agree that most of the hires they see are not good at their jobs. So clearly, hiring competent people is hard. So then why would we compound the difficulty with another factor of any kind, be it race or anything else? You would expect that in doing so, we would drastically decrease the quality. So
Sure.
then we're saying that race is more important than merit. And I don't know how people are missing this and think it's okay.
Yeah,
Like it's,
especially Supreme Court justices.
yeah, well, maybe she knows she wouldn't be here without it.
Maybe.
I mean, that could be it. Like you were talking about the psychology of it and what it does to them. Maybe she is constantly trying to prove that she deserves to be here. And if you say that affirmative action was bad and wrong, you are directly saying it is bad and wrong. You're sorry, indirectly saying that it's bad and wrong for her to be there.
Or
And
maybe she thinks that you're implying that she is a diversity hire and thus
right.
doesn't belong to be there.
And this
I
is
don't
all kind of
know.
subconscious.
Yeah, I
But
mean, could
I mean,
be.
it's if
I
you
just don't think it's. I don't think any of it's right.
yeah, it's we need to get
You
back
know.
to pure meritocracy in its entirely because everything else that anything else other than meritocracy means that people are going to be putting their efforts not into that merit and productivity, but into other things. It basically says the ratio of effort, the importance of putting an effort into being good is less, and it's horribly damaging at scale.
Hmm. It's gonna be bad.
Oh, it's going to get real bad.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't, of course, I think you're going to probably see a lot of companies, legal departments, start having conversations with people and go, you know, that thing that you're doing, we can't do that anymore because eventually somebody's going to sue us. And when they do, that's going to mean that we're going to have to pay them out because we're going to lose based on this decision. So let's stop doing that.
And and my I don't I'm assuming that the sort of implicit way that this works is that if companies start doing that now, they're not going to be penalized from doing it previously, even though it was a violation of the law at the time they did it.
It would depend, I would say, probably on how the time. I don't know. I be honest, I don't have any idea. My guess would be that it would be something to do with like a certain time limit of how much effect does it actually have at this point, right? So if you got passed over, let's say you got passed over for a promotion. Now, I think it makes a difference if that was 3 months ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think that will make a difference as far as
Well, and it's one of those things like, could you, if you got, let go end of last year, and you're pretty confident that the company you worked for has a DEI preference towards certain groups,
mhm.
could you then sue them under the basis that they,
You probably could at this point because you were terminated um, and this precedent kind of reaffirms some stuff, but you would have
right,
to
talk
have
to a
some
lawyer?
level of knowledge and that you could prove that that was the case because
Yeah,
that's
I
the
mean, it's,
biggest thing is having to is having to
well,
even with discovery being able to prove it.
sure, getting to discovery is the hard part. I mean, but if there's someone's championing DEI initiatives and talking about statistics and trying to get those numbers up, and
If they were doing that currently, even though they terminated you a year ago, and you felt like the reason they terminated you may have been because of these statistics that they're still talking about, yeah, I think you probably got a good case.
yeah,
Just a guess.
I mean,
I
and
know what
I'm.
attorney I would call if I were in that position.
Do you actually have his number?
Look, we don't need to talk about such things.
No, I do. I am curious though. So does this mean that these? So this occurred in the summer. Does that mean they need to fix their admissions now?
Oh, they've already sent out admission letters.
Yeah, I would say
Maybe,
yes.
maybe. And actually, well, maybe not. Maybe, maybe those they consider that decision's already been done.
But it's not like it was. My understanding is that the courts don't. The law hasn't changed.
Right, but they're not. So what I would say is, here's if I was their attorney, this is how I would argue it. I would argue that they have not continued that practice. That decision, those decisions were already made, and those people have already been
Yeah.
sent letters, and so it wouldn't be fair to them to withdraw those letters at this time, and that
No,
practice won't be used moving forward.
but you need to. You should. But somebody's been excluded for that, and you need to make it right for those people.
Well, I mean, if you had applied to Harvard or Yale, which I think were two of the
If you
ones
were
that were in,
white or Asian and applied to Harvard or Yale, I would contact your lawyer.
especially if you had really high scores on stuff or a really great GPA or
Or just want to stick it to Harvard or Yale.
any number of things, like you might,
Because in
you could you
discovery,
you could make the case that the pay differential between going to, let's say, I don't know, LSU to go to law school versus going to Harvard Law School or Yale could be a significant difference over the course of your lifetime. And if you rightfully should have been and you should have been accepted and were discriminated against, that they might be liable for the difference between what your lifetime's earnings would be.
Yep, I would call a lawyer.
That that'd be an interesting argument to make, and I'd love to sit in the court and listen to it.
I would love to see that. More people should do that. There should be groups out there who help you sue them pro bono. But
Uh, I mean, hypothetically, I think there's a, a a group called America's First Legal,
America's First Legal. Okay.
and I believe they do things of that nature, or so I hear. And Google.
I'm just making a note for later. But not for me. But yeah,
I'm
it's
just saying. There's a lot of companies that do stupid stuff to open themselves up to liability because they've gotten away with it for so long. And I think that gravy train is fixing to end
well,
real fast.
I think it's a greater. It is a symptom of a greater issue that we have in our current culture,
Sure.
where we do not care about doing good or bad. We just care about shame, being seen, being caught, being shown. Not everybody, obviously, but
Mhm.
that in general, a lot of people don't care about whether or not they've done good or bad. They care about whether or not people know they're believe they're doing something wrong or think that they're being bad.
To a certain extent, see, I think this is different. Whenever you look at it from a bigger perspective, um, like it's I think it's strictly an ROI thing, right? If you have people pushing you to do X,
Yeah,
whatever X is, that is would potentially be counter to what would be good for your company, but your customers are indifferent,
right.
so there's no downside. What did you just do?
I don't know. Hold on. All right, I have to finish my webcam here.
Nice. So anyways, like I was saying, like if they're looking at it, they have zero downside because their customers are indifferent. So they're still going to buy anyway. So their downside's really not that great.
Yeah,
The
it's
problem comes in when you pull a move like Bud Light did, where you just embarrass the entirety of your customer base, and 25 to 30% of them just stop buying your product. And I think this is another thing that's a pendulum thing that we've swung too far to one side, and people are like, all right, I've had enough, and I'm not like, just we're not doing this anymore ever.
but that's I mean, so what you're getting at is that there is a you have there's what I'm my point was there's no barriers to this. So the what is driving companies to adopt DEI, ESG, affirmative action, whatever you want to call it, is uh, small, minimal stuff. Like it's not a strong force. It doesn't really affect their bottom line. It's gotten to the point where it kind of affects their ability to gain capital, more investment, that sort of thing. But it's not a particularly strong force. There's nothing stopping it, other than say not wanting to do bad things. But no one was looking at it, so they just kept getting away at it, and so they
Right.
kept. No one cared. No one was shaming them for it, and so there was no disincentive for it. That's kind of my point. Is that no,
Right.
if if instead they're worried about, well, we shouldn't do that. That's wrong. That's bad. Then
I don't even
it's
think they care about the shame. I, I, I literally don't. I think it's a lot of it is just strictly a numbers game. When there's no dollar downside, you can shame. Like if you think about, let's
when I
think
say
about.
shame, I don't mean internal shame. I mean shame, being shamed.
Right. But if there's no,
But
my point is if there's no dollar value behind that, it doesn't matter. Because if you look at all of the previous boycotts that have come along from the right-hand side, they'll yell and scream and get all mad and everything else, but they still continue to buy the products. So when they continue to still buy the products, you can shame them publicly all you want to. If you're still buying their products, there's no dollar value associated with that shame. And so because there's not, it doesn't change behavior.
I'm talking about peer group shame. So were, if you went to a cocktail party and you're the CEO of
I don't think
some
that
company,
matters to them.
and the people in the cocktail party mocked you for, or like looked at you funny for the decisions you made, you wouldn't make those decisions. If like if you start going to a cocktail party and someone says, "Oh, I'm the CEO of Bud Light," and everybody just looks at you like, "Oh, you're that guy, huh?" He
Right,
will.
but
I don't care what dollar amount is on this. He will find a way to stop doing that.
yeah, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No,
I think most people are heavily swayed by that shame,
no,
by being shamed in their peer group.
no, they just won't. They'll find a different peer group. If you're a Bud Light CEO and you get shamed in a at a some party somewhere, right, that is all CEOs, you won't show up to that party with those CEOs anymore. You'll have BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard invite you to their party for their CEOs that are all doing the same things that you are. And what they'll do is they'll say,
I,
hey, this is okay.
I'm not talking about how to fix this. I'm saying that this got to this point because there was no shame. Because the BlackRock CEO, the Vanguard guys aren't being shamed either.
I
Like, or
understand.
I'm not even saying that that is how to what's stopping. I'm saying that that is the only restraint left. None of those guys care about being about good or bad. That's the problem. They need to be shamed in order to know they're doing good or bad, and no one in their peer group is going to shame them. In a true functioning society, if you were like if this was shameful behavior, you couldn't just go to a new peer group because that peer group would also think it's shameful behavior. Like
I
that's
I I mean,
like and that is
that's
what we're, I mean,
I think that's utopial. I don't think that's accurate.
no, I'm saying that that is the only way people know whether it's good or bad these days is through being shamed.
No,
Because
I
no
think
one shames, no one pays attention.
I agree to a certain extent, but I don't think that it matters to them. That's what I'm saying. I
That's
think that they are that they are horrible human beings and that they genuinely just don't care.
and I think that
I think what
most
really makes a difference is whenever you shame the people at, you know, at the convenience store and you shame them for buying Bud Light and supporting people who do that. I think that has an effect.
yes, but I'm saying that we have lost the sense of trying to do good or not bad. Like each person isn't they're trying to avoid being shamed instead of trying to do good. Do you understand the difference?
I do. I
Okay.
disagree.
You disagree that we've lost that?
No, I disagree with you that they care about being shamed.
I think they do care about being shamed within their social group. Everybody does.
And
It's a
again,
symbol of
I
status.
disagree.
The- I mean, I don't think that anybody's above being shamed. They just have different peer groups. So they will leave peer group if that was a way to avoid being shamed, but sometimes it's not if you're like for most people it's not. For the high CEOs maybe, though there's not very many CEOs out of there. So if they do something that is shameful to CEOs, sure.
I mean, in reality, right now, if if I was in a group of people that was shaming me and I didn't think that what I was doing was a problem, then I'd go find a different group.
Because you have a sense of good and evil, good and bad.
But
That's
I'm
part
just
of it.
what I'm
Like you
saying is that there are people who don't. How about this? Let's presume that a lot of people in this world don't understand or know what's good or bad. And
right.
so good and bad means nothing.
I know,
It's
that's my
only
point.
what's acceptable behavior. And what they think is acceptable behavior may not be what I think is acceptable behavior. And those two groups of people will go ahead and separate out and self-sort, right? And if I'm in a group of people that I disagree with, I'll go find another group. That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
But because you're going to do that because you have an intrinsic sense of good and bad instead of relying on what other people will tell you is good or bad, i.e. shame.
Or
That's my point.
or I don't have that sense at all, and all I care about is being agreed with. And this group doesn't agree with me, but I like doing like X is bad. Doing X is bad, right?
Okay.
That's according to group over here.
Right.
Group A says X is bad.
Right.
But I like doing X,
Okay.
and I'm a part of group A. And so group A starts shaming me for doing X.
Yes.
Now, there's two options. Either I can stop doing X and stay as a part of group A, or I go find a different group. X may be good, it may be bad.
People
I
generally
don't
don't
know.
like that's not that only works for super high status individuals. Because if you're it like
What are you
this is
talking
not how
about?
people think. I'm I'm serious. Like you don't know that group B exists. You don't know that there's not just more group A. You're unusual, well, probably me too, than that you are confident, you know whether what you agree on is not related to the agreement of other people.
Well, and I
Most
think
people don't. So what
maybe
they're going
that's
to
because
do,
social media may have changed that where or the internet, let's just say, to where you can find those people that agree with you much easier.
yes, and that's a
Because
big
50
part of it.
years ago, you had only the people that were around you. You wouldn't even
And
know that
that's
that existed.
and that's one of the reasons why we've seen degeneracy accelerate is because it's been easier for people with common abhorrent views to find each other and find tribe as opposed to talking within their peer group and everybody's like, dude, that's horrible, and then being shamed out of it.
Okay.
And so it used to be that there was a lot more sense more a lot more people were like you and I and that had a sense of what was right and wrong, was good and bad, let's say, and trying to do good and not do bad. And what we have is just people trying to avoid being shamed by their peer group. Now you're right. One of that strategies is going to be globbing onto a different peer group to separate from the peer group that where you don't have a lot of social status, let's say, and going with the one that you do because which is ultimately what being shamed is. It comes with a loss of status.
Hmm.
And so if you have an option to go with a group that will tolerate your degenerate behavior, be that you know, screw, corporate degeneracy where you're screwing over the little guy, or sexual degeneracy as you're seeing with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Uh, they're fine groups that tolerate them and potentially even reward them for that. But they don't have any sense of good and bad, just about whether or not they are being shamed or not.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
You don't agree that that's happening or that
No,
that
I don't
is.
I don't agree with your thesis there at the end. Like I don't think it has to do with being shamed or not. I think it's just
I'm
and let's be clear, like they actually I think some of them actually think that what they're doing is morally correct.
right because they're not being shamed by their peer group.
No, I think that even when well, we can get into an argument over whatever that means, but just because what you think is good versus bad doesn't mean that that's correct for everybody else,
I know. I'm
right?
saying they do not have an internal sense of good and bad. They do not. If you isolate them
How do you
without
know
the,
that?
it's a theory. I don't know it for sure, but this is tracks my observation. I'm not sure you understand what I'm saying.
I don't think you're communicating it well.
I'm trying to. Uh, what I'm referring to is the idea that so an intrinsic good or bad is going to be good and bad regardless of the opinion of your peer group. I think if these people and the peer group is what you associate with and sort of choose to uh, let people judge you on this a little bit. The people you associate with, and you ultimately give them power of judgment over you in this case. I think you and I aren't similar. We don't really, if our peer group suddenly started to judge us on stuff and judge us in ways that was counter to our own beliefs about what's good and bad, we'd be strongly off put by that and would either go off alone and or try to find another peer group. And because our sense of good and bad is not defined by our peer group, but you see this a lot where these a lot of people find their peer group and they ask their peer group if what they're doing is right or wrong, and their peer group will tell them so. And whatever the peer group tells them is what they believe. And so if the peer group changes, they will change their belief.
Okay.
So if the peer group changes their opinion, they will also change their opinion about so-called morality.
Sure. I think there are people that are definitely like that.
Right. I would say that's probably the majority of the population.
Maybe. I don't know.
Uh,
That I couldn't speak to because I don't have any.
it's a guess. I don't
I'd
know if
have to
that's true.
think about it to
Maybe it's a minority. I don't
put
know,
some
but
numbers together.
it's certainly a significant chunk. And that those people don't understand good and evil, or right and wrong, good and bad, however you want to conceptualize it. And so they are going to be much more tolerant of, well, if this thing is not hurting me or my friends, I don't really care too much whether or not they would find it shameful. As long as people don't know about it. Like they end up doing a lot of things that are shameful, but they don't think anybody will find out.
Okay.
And it doesn't bother them. They don't have an internal uh, uh, cognitive dissonance from doing that.
Okay.
It's like the internal guilt. That comes to terms when the society, they've offloaded that. So when society or the peer group effectively finds out about it, that's when all of that sort of feeling would come crashing down on them. And maybe this is getting too much into, like, I guess you may consider it pop psychology, but
Yeah, I don't. Again, like I think I understand what you're saying. I still don't agree. I don't think I don't think that that's an
I mean, I think,
accurate
yeah,
summation of what's actually going on. Now that's a theory. I just don't agree with it.
yeah, I thought we were
I'm not
more in
saying it's
alignment with
wrong.
this. I
Huh?
thought we'd be more in alignment on this, so I'm like not prepared to flesh out the basic principles here. I thought we already shared those, so probably better for another time.
I mean, I, here's the thing. Like I would argue that I think that there are a lot of people who inherently know what they're doing is wrong, and they just don't care, or they're going along just to get along. Just because they want to be part of a group, they will go to a group and join as part of a group that they know is morally wrong, that is doing immoral things, and they will agree with those immoral things as they speak, knowing full well that what
Oh,
they're
sure.
doing is absolutely immoral. And there's a perfect example of this um, with regards to like the male and female dynamic, right? Um, like Fresh and Fit, I'm not a huge fan of their podcast, but I've watched it and it does have its place, and I understand why they do what they do. But they make a very good point of pointing out that, you know, women say that body count shouldn't matter. The
Right.
amount of men that a woman has slept with, they say it shouldn't matter. Okay, so for any woman who says that, ask her what her body count is. How many people has she been with? And that's exactly what you get. Dead silence.
Yep.
Because my argument is they know that it's wrong. They know inherently that it is, but they want to tell themselves that it's not. And I've actually seen a lot of bad arguments on this lately where people are talking about, well, why is it okay for a man, but it's not okay for a woman? And it's like, well, because men and women, my argument is because men and women value different things.
Yeah,
Most women don't care if a man has a high body count, if he's been with a lot of women. Let me preface this as saying, I'm not saying that you should. I'm just saying that it's perceived differently. Men inherently, typically, as a general rule, see it, look upon it poorly for a female to have a higher body count, to have been with more men.
right.
As a rule, women don't tend to care how many women a man has been with. And that's up to, like, that's their judgment. Now, there are some that are like, no, I don't want to be with a dude that's been with 30 women. Like, no, don't want to do that. Okay, that's fair. You're welcome to be like that. But most women, when given the choice, like, they just don't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter to them unless it's like something astronomical, right?
I
If
mean,
you've
it's,
been with 1,000 women or you were a porn star or something like that, then the woman might care. But even at that, like, it's like, oh, it
I mean,
tips, like, it tweaks the dial a little bit.
I'm not
It's really
sure.
wild.
I mean, I'm not sure that that is the best example because it's sort of a like it's you can make the argument it's not a moral thing. The like there are guys that prefer a woman with low body count, but don't think it's immoral to sleep around.
Sure. And I'm not saying that necessarily it's a moral thing. I'm just saying that there's a cognitive dissonance there where people know that it's bad, right? You don't have to call it
Yes,
moral or not. It's
right.
known that it's bad. Women know that it's bad, and you also know how women know that it's bad because when a woman attacks another woman, almost instantly their first attack is to call them some sort of
You slot, you.
hussy, you've
Yes.
been whatever you want to call it. Like, that's the instant attack that they go to as default generally. So you know that that behavior is bad because you've got these two different ways of telling that that behavior is not
Or at
good.
least, yeah. I mean, it's. I don't know if they know it's bad in the sense that it's not valued by people around them.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then we'll immediately turn around and espouse that it's not an issue and nobody should care about it.
Well, they're saying nobody should care about it, not that nobody does care about it. And which
Well,
is,
they'll also say that nobody does care about it,
oh yeah, they're lying. They know they're lying.
which I'm like, okay, they're like, and you'll see a lot of them will say, well, none of my
They're
guy
trying to
friends care, and
shame
it's
you
like,
into not
okay,
caring.
it's
That's
fine,
what it is. They're
yeah,
trying to
that's
shame you into not caring.
sure, absolutely.
And it's, I mean, that's, and that's part of like, if you look, a lot of these people, they try to use shame as a way of controlling you.
I
It's not going
mean,
to work on you. I don't know
I
that you
hate
have shame. But
I hate to tell you this, but like, it's it, the great Kevin Samuels, sign language, shame, insults, guilt, and a need to be right.
I'm not going to touch that one.
So, speaking of sign, it's probably time to
Yeah,
sign off.
about that time. I kind of went off the rails a little bit there at the end.
Yeah, it's okay. I
But
think it was a good conversation. I mean,
yeah,
for anybody who wasn't aware, they'll now know that we don't just agree all the time.
yeah, we disagree frequently, but
Yeah, except about bacon. I think everybody loves bacon.
I disagree. Not everybody loves bacon. There are
Okay,
some ridiculously crazy people out there that don't like bacon.
vegans.
And
Wait, you said people. Never mind.
there's a lot of overlap with vegans and communists, huh?
So I hear.
On that bombshell, I think it's good enough. Thanks, guys, for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share.